Good morning! Welcome back to The Aggressor. I'm Trevor, and today we're talking about Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 3. MCU, yeah. I've done the first two phases. Season 2, I did Phase 1. Season 3, I've done Phase 2. And now in Season 4, I'm doing Phase 3. And since Phase 4 is wrapping up soon, I'm pretty sure in Season 5 I'll be covering Phase 4. And so on. I'm sure every season will be covering a phase of the MCU, which is fine by me. My original plan by doing the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I was going to cover the. Originally, my first plan was having an MCU episode where I just talk about all of it. And then when I was like, thinking about how I'm going to do this episode, I'm like, this is overwhelming. I can't do this. and eventually, I thought of doing it in phases, and I was gonna do them one after the other, 3 episodes in a row. Nah, that got overwhelming because I have to watch the movies first. I was going to watch all of the movies before starting the episodes, and I didn't have time for that. And now I have watched all of MCU Phase 3 months ago because I watched this at the beginning of my hiatus. And yeah, I was going to do this a long time ago. Let's see if my memory is still good. It's not. But I'm looking at the list. I probably should have rewatched because I'm like I remember all of these. I've seen every single MCU film. Now I've seen them twice. But I do remember all of them. I just have to think about it. I'm also improvising. I literally hit record and was like, "Hey, talking," which that's kind of what I do. I'm also just going to start here with the release order is different from the chronological, which is that's not unheard of for the MCU. They did that in phase 1 where the Iron Man was released first, but Captain America was chronologically first. Now this time, another Captain is first, but not the one you're thinking of. It's not Captain America. It's Captain Marvel, which is what I accidentally said first. So you probably were thinking of that, or you already know Phase 3, and you knew I was going to say Phase 3. I mean, I was going to say my Cap. I'm also not good at spoken, so there's that. So the release order isn't too different from the chronological order, but it does kind of get a little confusing. I'm looking at the list. It's similar enough that I'm like, what's really the difference? Other than like, I'm looking. I don't know whether to go chronological or release order. I'm gonna go with release order. Chronologically, I don't know. I'll just go in whatever order I see fit. Starting with Spider-Man: Homecoming. Okay, no, I'm kidding. That's what. Either way, that's like actually either way, that's number 4. Fourth release and fourth chronologically. So that's the first one in the phase that is in the same spot. So Well, I'm just gonna list the release order, then say the chronological order. Release order: Captain America: Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Thor: Ragnarok, Black Panther, Avengers: Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, Avengers: Endgame, and Spider-Man: Far From Home. It feels weird having an end. You think Endgame would be the end. Chronological order: Captain Marvel, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Captain America: Civil War, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Thor: Ragnarok, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Avengers: Infinity War, Avengers: Endgame, Spider-Man: Far From Home. Which, because of what happens at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's hard putting that there. I know technically it is. It happens concurrently with Infinity War. And I know this because of what happens in the post-credit scenes when everyone except Scott is dusted. And if you're watching this chronologically, you're like, "Hey, what happened?" And if you're this came out after Infinity War, obviously, because people were like, "Hey, what happened?" Like they just said. But then, like, it came out after Infinity War, and then you're watching it, and at the time, I remember at the time wondering, like, why is this even here? Why is this released after Infinity War? These are the post credits, like, oh, that's. And obviously, he is the one that saved the day in Endgame, and I am definitely getting ahead of myself because we're not at Endgame yet. We are only at Civil. No, we are at Captain Marvel. That movie's taking you way back, even before Iron Man, the very first movie in the MCU. That's taking you back to 1990 something. I don't remember. I think 92. Hey, Google. What year does Captain Marvel take place? Nope. I simply asked for the year. You didn't have to give all that. But yes, yes, she's right. I was wrong. I I thought 92 for some reason, but 95 makes sense. Middle of the 90s. That's when that 90s show's taking place. It take set in the show of the 90s. It's set in the middle. But yeah, yeah. You gotta be careful with prequels, especially the long extending series like this, because you don't want to mess up some of the pre-established lore. Like, I don't, I can't really. Okay, I know there is some things that people were upset with retcon in this. Like, for example, Nick. I was gonna say Nicholas Sparks. Nick Fury, complete opposite of Nicholas Sparks, as far as I know. I don't know him personally. So, in one of the Avengers movie, I don't remember which one, or MCU movies, at some point, Nick Fury says that he got his scar from. Oh, crap, I don't remember where he says he got his scar. He says he got his scar from something really cool. And in Captain Marvel, it turns out. Not his scar. He lost his eye to something cool. But then it turns out in Captain Marvel, a cat scratched his eye. So I guess you can say he got cat scratch fever. Ah! Now why am I making that reference? That's a deep cut. Literally. Anyway, granted that does fit into his character to make something up to make it. He was trying to intimidate the person he was talking to, so it's like, yeah, something really cool. It made me lose my eye, not a cat. Technically, it wasn't a cat; it was a flurgan. So yeah, you could tell the flurgan was powerful because it swallowed an infinity stone and lived. Well, the Tesseract. Red Skull simply touched the Tesseract and got sucked into a portal. This cat literally swallowed it and was fine. But yeah, I liked Captain Marvel. It was. I have a problem though with overpowered characters like Super. I am not interested in Superman. I don't care what anyone says. Some people are like, "Oh, he's the best superhero. He's overpowered. He's boring." That's kind of with Captain Marvel. Man of Steel was the first time I actually cared about the character. Granted, he was still overpowered, but it actually gave him a character. He wasn't just invincible. It like gave him. It's basically, it took the song "Superman It's Not Easy" by Five for Fighting and made that into a movie. That's what I liked about it. Captain Marvel, it actually had it was a story, like gave her character to from ground up. It's hard to explain why I like it because everyone's like, oh, it's just Mary Sue. I don't care. Shut up. You misogynist. I'm not saying it's the best movie in the MCU. If actually after I'm done with this, actually, I will never be done with this because all of the MCU movies, all the phases there, Mar- Kevin Feige says he's got the next 10 years planned, and the phases that he's announced goes out through for 4 years. So we're never going to be done with this. But at some point, I should do like a top 30 list because Wakanda Forever is the 30th movie in the MCU. Think about that. The James Bond series is 70 years old, 60 years old. I think it's 60 years old because the first one came out in like 62, I think. Yeah, wow, that means this is the 60th anniversary of James Bond, and they just released the 24th one. Again, I don't do any research, so I could be completely wrong, but 24 movies in 60 years, and yet Marvel pulled off 30 movies in 13 in since 2008. I'm not good at mathing. So, yeah, I should rank them. What is my favorite MCU movie? That would be, I don't know. I get to number five and be like, and the top five are just kind of whatever's left. It's kind of interchangeable because I don't know that would be. What the top five MCU movies would be for me. I don't even know what my least. Actually, I could tell you my least favorite, my absolute least favorite MCU movie, The Incredible Hulk. I legitimately forget it's part of the MCU. I think most people forget it's part of the MCU. Anyway, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Carrying on the tradition of a completely unique entry into the MCU by having the second one being completely different. Technically, you can watch them back to back. I mean, they're in separate phases, but they don't really tie into anything. Like Guardians 1 doesn't tie into Age of Ultron at all. So it's in phase 2, but it's like, why is this here? It's there because they put it there. it's there so the third one will make sense, and then they'll come in later in Infinity War and be like, "Hey, this is why we put them in there." Imagine if like they did the whole Guardians trilogy and they never interacted with the rest of the the Avenger people, or like they never interacted with anybody else in the MCU. But like James Gunn and Feige were like, "Yeah, this is totally part of the MCU." It's like, how? How is this part of the MCU? Yeah, but like they obviously they did interact with the rest. And Guardians 2 is my favorite of the two Guardians movies because it's I don't like using words like better, even though I do all the time. But I do think it's better. I'm not good at explaining why. I literally have a movie review podcast, and I can't explain why I like movies. Like, this movie's good. Why? Because it's good. I liked it. Made me feel happy. That's the reason. It made me feel happy. Made me feel things. I loved Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 from the moment it started. Mr. Bright Sky, Bright, Mr. Bright Sky, The Killers, and Electric Light Orchestra. Wow. Yeah, with Groot dancing. I think it's Mr. Blue Sky. Is that the song that's playing? I believe so. I could have not said anything there. I'd be like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about if I was right. If I didn't, it's like, I'm a loser. I don't know what I'm talking about. Which, if you've made it this far into the podcast, or heck, even this episode, you should know by now. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I just say things. Maybe they'll make sense, maybe they won't. Who's to say? Not me. Um, yeah, Guardians 2 is where they introduced Mantis, who is probably my favorite Guardian because she's adorable. And I hate the part where Drax is like, "Oh, you're hideous." It's like, no, she's not. She's adorable. She has like this cool power. She like stops Thanos from being Thanos for a minute. He like calms down until Star Lord's Spider-Man: Homecoming. Right, that was the second reboot. Not the third reboot. It's the third version of Spider-Man on the big screen, but the second reboot. The first one wasn't a reboot. The first Spider-Man wasn't a reboot because it was the first Spider-Man. You can't reboot something that's never been made. I think. Anyway, of course, Marvel knows how to handle Spider-Man, and they made the best version. In my opinion, Tom Holland's Spider-Man is the best Spider-Man. Granted, I do love. I was gonna say Tom Holland twice. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. Almost said Garfunkel. Uh, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. I love their versions of Spider-Man. They're all three are good in their own way, and they all three bring something completely different to their version of Spider-Man. In my opinion, though, Tom Holland is the best. I was gonna say the most faithful to the comics, but I don't know. I've never read a Spider-Man comic. I know I just outed myself as a fake nerd. Yeah, I'm not a comic book reader. Just a comic book watcher. Yeah, I've I keep up with some comic book YouTube channels. They basically, obviously for copyright reasons, they can't just sit there and read comic books and the panels and stuff, but they like summarize it so that you get the basic idea. And that's how I basically know most of the original story of The Walking Dead. So I don't consider the comic book to be spoiler because they changed the show enough to keep it fresh to the people that know the comics. It just gives you kind of they use it as kind of a guideline, like yeah. So when it gets to a scene in the show, I'm like, oh, this they're taking it from this. They're finally at the Watchers or the Whisperers or something, you know. So that's kind of with comics. They're taking inspiration from them, but changing them to match their vision. And I never read a Spider-Man comic, but I've seen enough Spider-Man content, primarily all the movies and the 90s animated series, which that was my introduction to Spider-Man, was the 90s animated show. And to this day, my favorite version of Spider-Man. I said Tom Holland's my favorite. Tom Holland's my favorite live action Spider-Man. My favorite version of Spider-Man ever is the 90s animated series. And that's like the definitive Spider-Man. You know how in the Dark Knight, in the Arkham series, the game series, in the trilogy. Yes, I said trilogy because there's only three games. Only three games. They took the Batman animated series voice cast and brought them back to voice these characters because I guess to a lot of people, those people, like that's the voice of Batman, that's the voice of Harley Quinn, that's the voice of all these other characters, and the Joker. So yeah, that is me with Spider-Man. When I think of Peter Parker, I think of that voice from that show. Yes, I'm not saying voice actors. If the only voice actor from any of these shows that I know is, I was gonna say Tom Holland, Andrew crap, Mark Hamill. He voiced the Joker, obviously. I know the voice of Batman. I just can't think of it off. I think it's Kevin something. I could be wrong. Hey Google, who voiced Batman in the animated series? Kevin Conroy. He's right there at the top, under Adam West. I knew it was Kevin something. But yeah, I could do an episode of Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man is my favorite superhero. I will say that. It's probably obvious because this little digression I take and I have take. Anyway, Thor Ragnarok. Oh, yes. When they announced this movie, I was like, "Oh, that's going to be a dark movie." And I remember the first logo for it made it look like it was going to be super dark. And I, I'm I'm a huge fan of Greek mythology. My sister is a huge fan of Greek mythology. When they announced Thor Ragnarok, we were like, "Oh, this is going to be a depressing one." Because the first one was kind of serious. The second one was really dark. So like this is going to be even darker. And so I was not really looking forward to it because like I didn't like Thor: The Dark World. Of course, if you listen to my episode on Phase Two, you'll see my rewatch of it in retrospect. Uh, After seeing the entire MCU up to this point and going back and watching for the Dark World, I was like, oh, that's what they were going with. It's better in retrospect. Going back and watching it now, it's like, oh, okay. A lot of the things that I didn't like about it make more sense now, and I like it more. It's not my least favorite. I grouped The Incredible Hulk and Thor: The Dark World together as my lowest MCU movies, but Thor: The Dark World is a little higher now because in retrospect, it is a better movie than I took it to be. But at the time, I didn't like how dark it was. It was a boring story. I still don't remember who the villain was. I literally just saw it like a year or so ago. Maybe not even a year ago. And I still can't really tell you much about what happens. Thor, I mean, Loki, quote unquote, dies, and that's about it. Something about Jane having something inside her that needs to be extracted. I don't remember much about it, but yeah, like I'm just like when they announced Thor Ragnarok and they showed the logo, I was like, ugh, okay, what are they doing? But then they released that first trailer, and I'm like, oh, they're taking it in a lighter route. And I remember seeing somewhere that it was Kevin Smith was Chris Hemsworth was, I think, the one that said that Kevin Smith was the reason he wanted to change it because okay, Kevin Smith is like the ultimate nerd. He's like the king of the nerd community. I literally like big movies like the Star Wars trilogy and the like Endgame and stuff. Like I'll watch those and then I'll sit down and wait for Kevin Smith to release his review because sometimes his review is as long, if not longer, than the movie itself. And you can tell like, he's got a passion for this material. He is like he's not just I'm a movie director, so I don't care about that stuff anymore. No, he is a nerd. He is a fan, and he's into it. And so like his word has weight to it, and he didn't like how dark the Dark World was. And so, from what I remember, his negative review of it is what led to them making Ragnarok lighter in tone. And Kevin Smith, we applaud you for that and so many other reasons. Like, he's a legend. Like, Kevin Smith is legitimately a legend. And, but anyway, I am definitely glad they made this a lighter movie. It is a little heavy on the jokes. Like they went kind of extreme on the other way. Like they went from dark and depressing to, that's wacky. That's a little too funny, Disney. What are you doing? Kind of like they did uh beginning of the Last Jedi. The can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm trying to reach the Emperor, whatever he says. It's like this is a little too funny. Like this is the little. What are you doing? But definitely a better tone change. I love Ragnarok. I am a huge fan of what they did to it. I especially love uh, Krog. Yeah, I'm not good at remembering names. Taika Waititi's character. He's the director and had a character, and I thought he did the character. I thought he was doing a character, but then I actually um, heard him in an interview recently for the new Thor movie, and I realized that he was just playing himself basically because he that's the way he plays that character is how he actually is. He actually is like that, and it's hilarious watching his interviews. It's he himself is a character, so I'm I'm glad he did that. He's like immortalized now. Black Panther. Okay, so I heard that they filmed Black Panther before they filmed Endgame, or maybe they filmed Endgame before Black Panther. I don't remember one or the other, and they didn't know how popular. No, I think what it was is they because they had filmed Black. I don't remember at the point that they basically killed off T'Challa's character in Infinity War with the dusting. They didn't know how popular he was going to be, so it was kind of like oh, not a big deal. But then after Black Panther came out, they were like, oh, this character is like really popular, and I think he was introduced in Civil War, and I kind of like that like where characters are introduced in other movies instead of having a movie just be their origin. They're doing origins in other movies, so whenever their movie starts, they can just begin the story. You don't have to go through the whole how did he become the Black Panther? Oh, his father died. Oh, let's watch that again. It's like, how many times do you have to see Uncle Ben die? But granted, this is the first time we've seen his father die because this is his first live action. I think, I think that's his first live action take. I'm not too sure. How I think it is because what's funny is people are like, this is the first black superhero movie live action, and then everyone's like, are you forgetting about Spawn? Are you forgetting about Blade? And I'm like, did everyone just collectively forget about Meteor Man? And so, and what's funny is the Meteor Man came out. I forgot when it came out. I grew up watching that movie. I love Meteor Man. It's a hilarious movie. I should watch it again. And it got semi popular at the time. I think it was like the late 80s, early 90s. And Marvel did a limited run of Meteor Man comics. So technically, Meteor Man can be in an MCU movie. Or if they're doing all this multiverse stuff, they could have the actor who played Meteor Man suit up and be like kind of an updated version of his character and come into the MCU and like this is me now. Yeah, touching what if he had touched that evil book? Because if you're not familiar with Meteor Man, one of his powers is he can touch a book and absorb all of its knowledge for like 30 seconds. And so like what was is really interesting like in the climax of that movie, he's like fighting somebody and he like picks up like a kung fu book and he's like using kung fu moves and stuff because like he has all that knowledge. What if he touched the that evil book that Wanda uses? I knew the name because I casually said it at work the other day and now I can't think of it. And but what if he touched that, or what if he touched the good one that burned up in Multiverse of Madness? I'm not good with names. Hey Google, what's the name of the evil book from WandaVision? That one. What if Meteor Man touched the Darkhold? Ooh, now we're getting theological here. What if Meteor Man touched the Bible? Anyway, Avengers Infinity War. Right, so they Black Panther came out obviously it came out before Infinity War. But they filmed it. I don't remember which order they filmed it. They filmed these in such a weird order. Um Pepper Potts, the actress, Gwyneth Paltrow didn't even know she was in Spider-Man: Homecoming because they filmed these things so weird. She thought she was filming something for the Avengers. At the end of Avengers: Homecoming, she like walks into the room and Tony says something to her, and then they walk out. And she didn't know it was for Spider-Man. So like, there's an interview where they were like, "Oh, we did Spider-Man together," and she's like, "I'm not in Spider-Man." Yes, you are. And then everyone made a big joke about it, like, "Oh, Gwyneth Paltrow didn't know she was in Spider-Man." Well, think of her filming schedule. They film these things so out of order and like and just out randomly. I know it's like not normal to defend Gwyneth Paltrow because she's kind of a weird person, and like, but in this case, I think she's I kind of have to defend her because it's like you're making fun of someone whose filming schedule was so crazy that I'm surprised she even knows what film she's in because she's in so many at a time. I'm not really helping the case, am I? Anyway, Avengers Infinity War. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do the two parts together. I'm gonna skip to Ant-Man and the Wasp. The Ant-Man movies. Okay. About the Ant-Man movies. I understand why they do these movies. Because he's a semi-popular character. However, I kind of feel like the Ant-Man movies are they're basically filler. I like them. They're funny. They're lighthearted to an extent, but like the whole point of the first one was to introduce the quantum realm. And the whole point of the second one was I don't remember. Yeah, they kind of further explored like the quantum realm, but then like the ending where like he's stuck in the quantum realm in the van, so that in game, I'll come back to that. So like these are fun movies. I don't get me wrong. I like the Ant Man movies. They're fun, but they're almost pointless in the grand scheme of the MCU. However, I will point out, and at the end of, let me backtrack a little. So, I worked very briefly at a souvenir shop on Pier 41 here in San Francisco. It's right next to that the big arch, Pier 43 arch, the white one, the famous one. I worked right next to that. And during the climax of Ant-Man and the Wasp, there's like that scene where he like becomes really big and he like walks out to that ship. Right before that, where like they make the building big right there, like up here. That is right in front of where I work. Right where that arch is. You can actually see where I used to work at the same building, like a couple of years before I even worked there. And it was like so cool because I was in that location every day. And like I obviously at the time I watched this movie again for this review, I didn't work there anymore. The souvenir shop had closed, so I wasn't working there anymore. It wasn't that souvenir shop at the time. It was like a poster shop, and that closed down, and my store opened, and then that closed, and now it's. I walked past it a couple of days ago. It's still vacant, but I'm still good friends with one of my coworkers from there, and I took a picture of it on my TV screen and I sent it to her. And I'm like, look, you can see where we worked, and she was like, oh my god, and, it was really cool, yeah. And so that was like a little fun fact. But like, I think my favorite thing about the Ant Man movies is his friend. I can't remember his name, but like in both Ant Man movies, they have his friend recount something that happened, like the way he tells the story and then like they reenact it and they have like the actors like mimic the way he talks. It is hilarious. That's my favorite part of both Ant Man movies, and I hope they do it again. The Ant Man and the Wasp Quantumania that's coming up. I hope they do it again. It'd be weird if they didn't. And honestly, I love it so much. I would love it if Disney had like a Disney Plus series with him just telling different stories. It could be like an MCU stories, or since it's Disney, like telling like Disney stories and have like animated, or nah, it wouldn't be as funny if it's animated. But yeah, just like a Disney Plus series of him telling stories and people like reenacting it and like mimicking the way he talks. I would love that. I want to see that so much. And then Captain Marvel. I'm looking at the release order. Did I miss anything? I'm looking at the wrong list. I started with Captain Marvel, and then I went. Oh crap! Oh, I switched list. Ah, okay. So I went Captain Marvel, Guardians of 2, and then I went up to the chronological list. I went to Homecoming. Okay, I did skip one. I skipped two. Doctor Strange. I'm gonna go with Doctor Strange. That movie is well, strange. Uh that when I first saw the trailers for that, I didn't know much about Doctor Strange. I had obviously heard references to him and like other things, like the original Spider-Man, like actually Spider-Man 2. It's like when they're trying to name Doc Ock and they're like Doctor Strange. That's good. I'll just take him. And like I'd seen him in like the Spider-Man animated series, obviously, and so like I knew of him. I didn't really know much about him. So like I saw the first trailer, I was like, my first thought was Inception. Like, oh, they're just ripping off Inception, but apparently that's who Doctor Strange is. Like they have that. Like it's like, oh, they finally realized this, this thing that I mean, Doctor Strange does in the show, in the comics, and it's cool. And I don't, I don't know much about Doctor Strange. I can't really comment on how accurate he is. I again, like I remember him being in the Spider-Man animated '90s animated show. But I don't remember enough to be like that is inaccurate to what I remember. I just remember him being in it, just him existing. There's a Doctor Strange. But yeah, like the story was really good. I like the aspect of it. Like it starts off with him, he's this cocky, arrogant doctor, and it really showed how good he is with his hands. Like I think if I remember correctly, like there's a procedure that they want like like the robot to do because no human could possibly do this procedure. It's like brain surgery, but he's like, but apparently I think like the robot was glitching or something, or like it was taking a while to come turn on. He was like, I will do it freehand, and they were like, that's crazy, and then like he did it, and it just kind of showed like, oh yeah, he's really good with his hands. Then he gets in a bad car accident and can't use his hands anymore. And he slips into a depression, and then he does, he finds the magic place and does the magic stuff. And the other stuff happens. And the ancient one, Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Yeah, I say that all the time. Like I walk into a room, Dormammu, I come to bargain. And yeah, good times, good times. It really established him as like a really powerful, and then I'm glad they use him because like he's in Ragnarok very briefly. However, they did kind of there is kind of what you call it inconsistency or plot hole continuity error. Whenever he uses his magic, it's orange, no matter what he's doing. Like the orange rings go around his hand, or like he does the sling ring, and then like everything's orange. But in Ragnarok, when he's there briefly, he doesn't. He just casually does. Ow. I tried to snap my finger, and then it like I did it wrong. It popped my middle finger knuckle. Anyway, um, he does magic. There's no orange. He just casually does it. There's just no visuals, which is a small thing. It took me a long time to even notice that. I think I saw it in like a TikTok. It's like here's something that they got wrong. It's just a movie. It's like they're not gonna get everything right. I mean, like, we can nitpick. Yeah, it's an error. So what? It's just it doesn't really ruin the movie for me. Like I said, I didn't even notice it for the longest time. But yeah, I'm glad they used him. Like he's just kind of popping up in different MCU projects. It's really cool. I like Benedict Cumberbatch. He's so funny. And he's a really good actor. Uh, Civil War. I keep forgetting that is a Captain America movie. Because I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Avengers movie. Like, nope, that is not an Avengers movie. It takes place the first one after Age of Ultron. So it's like we go from Avengers movie to semi-Avengers movie. Hulk and Thor aren't there. So, it's not an Avengers movie. All the Avengers aren't there. And of course, we soon find out why they're not there. They're on a different planet. I don't know if they were at a different planet at the time, but they were off doing other things. It still feels like an Avengers movie, but it was the first time that all of them like came together against. each other. I know the story from the comics because again the YouTube channels that like explain things, and before they announced Spider-Man, I was like they can't do this movie without Spider-Man because Spider-Man's an important part of this movie, and I was hoping, and what I was thinking because in the comics, um, Spider-Man sides with Tony Stark, and to kind of to prove his point, Peter Parker unmasks himself in public. Like he does like a news conference and like unmasks himself. Like I'm Peter Parker, and yeah. So there was rumors that Spider Man was going to be in Civil War, and I thought it would have so much emotional impact if they had Tobey Maguire's Spider Man be the one to do it, so that he unmasks himself, and it's a more emotional impact because it's Tobey Maguire, and then everyone's going to be like, "Well, where was he during the events of the first Avengers? He retired as Spider-Man. That he was already kind of on the fence about it to begin with. He retired, and that's why like whenever the aliens came down, he looked at it and was like, "Looks like a you problem." I don't think he would have done that. Maybe he lost his powers. I don't know. Maybe he lost his powers and he couldn't Spider-Man. He's like, well, that's too dangerous. I have a family now because Mary Jane and has kids. He's married to Mary Jane and has kids in my head canon at the time. And then he put on the suit just to unmask himself. Like, hey, me. I'm back. It's me. But obviously, that's not what happened. They introduced a brand new Spider-Man. And I'm like, oh, they're going to introduce a new Spider-Man. And he's going to unmask himself. And he didn't unmask himself. In fact, when he finally is unmasked, that's a big problem. We'll get to that. War. I was afraid it was going to get too political because from what I saw in like the YouTube videos about, that explained it, it did get very political, and it was like, yeah, and it did kind of touch on that, but it was still more an action film. Yeah, I like it. Again, I can't rank it. I'm not a ranker. I automatically rank things in my head, but sometimes there's 30 movies on a list and you can't rank them all. Some things are too big to rank. I even have a favorite sister. I know you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to have a favorite sibling. And what's worse is the other siblings know she's my favorite sibling. They don't seem to mind so much, actually, now that I think about it. They know she's my favorite sibling. Anyway, Thanos. He was the big baddie that he was set up from the first Avengers movie, and he would occasionally be brought up, or you'd see him in like Guardians, or at the end of uh the Guardians 2. Fine, I'll do it myself. Yeah, we finally get to see him in action, and Marvel is known for having like one-dimensional villains or really bad villains. Thanos is probably one of he's up there. Up to like Killmonger from Black Panther. I didn't even mention him. I haven't really been going into detail about like the story of each of these. There's so many movies. I can't review every single one of them right now. You go into the stories and all the villains, but like Killmonger and Thanos are probably my two favorite villains from the Infinity Saga. Um, they both have good points and they're sympathetic. Killmonger has more good points than Thanos. Like I'm not saying we should kill half the universe, but I mean he was a villain, um, not evil. If that makes sense. Um, he had he thought he had good intentions. He was trying to help everyone. In his mind, he thought he was helping everyone. Obviously, it didn't come out that way. And so, like, he wasn't out for, like, I mean, he was out for power, like the power stones, like the infinity stones, but like he wasn't out to like I'm the ruler of the universe. I'm the new god or whatever. Look at his throne room. Everything's made of stone. It's like all decrepit. It's not like made of gold and have gems all in it. He was, and then like whenever he was a good villain. Whenever he finally won at the end, like he won like that. I finally snapped right. I say that all the time. Oh, did you watch Infinity War? Yeah, Thanos won like that. When he finally won, did he like what did he do? He did exactly what he said he would do. He said he would like go and rest and watch the sunset on a grateful universe, and that's exactly what he did. Of course, the universe wasn't grateful, but like he was a villain, not a evil person, if that makes sense. I'm just repeating myself at this point. But he was a very, very well written and very sympathetic, and you can tell whenever he kills Gamora, which is a spoiler. Wait a second. Um, I just realized the audio in this episode probably isn't going to sound very good up to this point because my mic isn't plugged in. I've been using my laptop microphone. Let me. Um, did my audio change? Yeah, now I'm using my actual microphone. I didn't realize my microphone wasn't plugged in. So it's a good thing my laptop has a microphone. Otherwise, I'd have been talking for almost an hour for no reason. And I would have been very upset and probably not even recorded this episode at all. Anyway, Thanos, good villain. Whenever he kills Gamora, you can tell like he doesn't want to. He has sorrow, like he loves her. She's his daughter in his mind. Like he's adopted. It's a very twisted relationship, like how he basically kidnapped her. He didn't adopt her, he kidnapped her and killed half her family. He killed her family and half her people. So it wasn't like a loving relationship. I mean, look at what he did to Nebula. It wasn't love, but like he loved her in his own way. So when he finds out like in order to get the soul stone, he has to sacrifice something he loves. And look, the one he loves is right there. And so he really wants the soul stone, so he grabs her by the arm, and you can tell he doesn't want to, and he throws her over the edge. And what's funny is like I don't think anybody saw that coming, like in that universe, because even Gamora's like, "Huh, jokes on you. You don't love anyone. Wait, why are you grabbing my arm?" So, yeah, like Thanos, this um, Kang the Conqueror is the next big threat, and they have to do a really good job to top Thanos because he was a very good villain. And then you get Avengers Endgame. Oh yeah, he won at the end. He snaps wrong hand. He snaps his finger, and half the world dusts, and the movie ends. And if that had been the last movie, if they had announced a part two and that was the last movie of the MCU, and they're like, "This is the final movie of the MCU," and it's like, "Oh yeah, that's obviously they're going to win, isn't it?" Yeah, and then snap, he disappears, everyone vanishes, movie ends. Holy crap, they did it! But yeah, no, it kind of hurt their case when you have a Spider-Man movie coming out like a month after Endgame comes out. It's like I wonder what's gonna happen. But yeah, this movie I saw this in theaters. I saw Endgame and I saw Infinity War and Endgame in theaters, And yeah, I in there are two different Thanoses. I mean, technically, it's the same Thanos, but it's literally two different Thanoses because the Thanos that we know dies at the beginning of Endgame. Thor goes for the head, decapitates him right at the beginning, and then there was a shock gasp at 5 years later, and then yeah, we get Thanos again because there was a past Thanos comes to the future, the present, and not as well written, not as sympathetic. This one is more evil, like actual, like he's literally like, I'm gonna wipe the entire universe down to a single atom and start from scratch. It's like, okay, now you're getting to, I want to be a god type level, and that's not as interesting. Um, yeah, um, he's at that point, he's just kind of evil. But it did make him more of a threat because yeah, like see in Infinity War, whenever they fought him on that on Titan, he was kind of fair. Like he stabbed Tony Stark and was like, I respect you, but he didn't kill him like right away. Like he could have like made sure that he was dead. He could have like made sure that all of them were dead before he left, but he left like right then, like alive. Of course, he Tony could have died from his injuries. The whole foam on his wound or whatever. Had the Thanos from Endgame had been there, he would have like decapitated him or something. He would have made sure they were all dead. That's the difference between the two. Very different Thanoses, but very needed Thanoses for their time. Because they needed a greater threat. Thanos. Uh, eh, However, like when Tony snapped his fingers and then Thanos' army, I think Thanos kind of dies too quick. Like he kind of falls on his knees, and then all at once he's just all of him turns into dust. I think it would have been more satisfying if like he started dusting at the hands and like saw it and he saw like the terror in his face, like oh this is happening, and then like his head goes, but like he just turns into dust like right away. Like it's just over. But it is what it is. It's fine. It's great. It's it's Endgame. But that wasn't the end. That was not the end. Because a month later, as I said, we had Spider-Man Far From Home, the first post snap on post blip post end game film story. And at first I was upset that they did that. They didn't just end with Endgame, but it kind of makes sense because like it tells like the immediate aftermath of it, and it starts off with that like student film of like they called it the blip, but then like there is a moment in that video